Sorry. The minutes of the meeting, which I changed, did not get to everybody, and I apologize for that. What we're gonna, but apparently the word got around anyway, that we're gonna be discussing possible changes to building code and restrictions on building in certain areas of the floodplain. I told Karen we would be talking about her letter that she sent to us in any case. So, but before we begin, I wanted to introduce John Geisling, who is with the Civil Engineer 3 floodplain administrator for the Department of Land Use for Newcastle County. And he is I got it right.
Yeah.
And he's involved in, I had originally asked him to comment on what the county was doing as far as, development in the floodplain. And he has a presentation that he was nice enough to send me, and I asked him to give it to us tonight. But anyway.
Well, it's fine. I printed it out here and I can just work off the laptop. I
Okay.
can just speak.
All right. I feel bad though, because we.
No, don't worry. It's
Listen,
not, it's not,
Yeah, John, but look at how super duper this thing is.
it is not.
Yeah,
But-
unfortunately, it doesn't work.
I just took something I did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, right, yeah,
I can speak.
okay, I appreciate that. All right, so we're gonna do a roll call for, the meeting is called to order, by the way. Roll call, Sandra, you want to start?
Sandra Taylor.
Mike Marinelli.
Bill Knight. Alice Real. Okay, has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from last meeting? I had one question, which was on page 3. Ms. Real noted that you had heard of pervious asphalt. The end of that, the comments from the task force members on other items. This is the second to last paragraph. Maybe somebody can tell me what, I'm not sure this is what was said. That Newcastle does not have a problem with recharging the city because of marshland. Recharging, is that the right word?
Recharging is the correct word.
Huh?
That is the correct word. It's a process with the marshland.
Recharging is a term of art, is that what you're saying?
It's the correct word. It's
Okay,
a part of the process of,
okay,
with marshland.
all right, I missed that. I thought that might be the case, so I just want to be sure. Okay, now I have a couple of updates.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Did you want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, yes. Motion to approve them, anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, aye. Minutes are approved. I got an email today from Ann Baldwin from the National Natural Resources Conservation Service, the one that the council sent a letter to asking for them to do a preliminary investigation. And that Ann says, I received a response today regarding the status and timeline. The new watershed funds have not yet been released to the agency in our financial system for the new fiscal year. This is expected to happen by the end of the month, and then the PIFR's funding request will be approved and the money released to the states with a target date of November 15th. I believe there is no concern about approving this PIFR request. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Have they already started evaluating us?
I don't, that I don't know, but it sounds like that they're going to at least say that we can do the preliminary investigation. At least that's what Ann is saying here. I don't know anything beyond that. So anyway, so that's pretty cool. I also, last time we were here, we talked about the interim report and we got it worked out over email, and it was sent off to the council, and I got a thank you from Michael Platt, who's the president of the council, so I know they got it, and we have not been asked to do a presentation of it yet, so I don't know that that's in the offing, so it might be that's just going to be accepted. Also, David Athey, as we said last month, is on a medical leave, and we were concerned, Gail and I talked about this, we were concerned that we're missing his expertise here in the meetings, which we really have appreciated. And plus, I didn't like the idea that we were pressuring Mr. Athey while he's recovering from an illness to, to tackle our problems. So I asked Bill Barthel if he could see whether or not we could get a substitute. And he sent my email along to Mr. Blenderson, I think, Bolender, who was David Athey's boss at ACOM. And this is his response today. So as you correctly surmise, of course, I've been undoing myself from my missed week. He had just been on vacation. I don't think I am the right person to attend the meetings since I have no level of expertise in sea level rise issues at all. I need to check with the other staff and see who's the right fit. Might even have to ask Dave, since I hear from him at least via email pretty much every week. I can have someone lined up for the next meeting. So that's,
Who was the response from?
Hmm?
Who was the,
this is from Brian Bolender, who is David Athey's boss at ACOM. Okay, so that's probably going to be taken care of. I also have heard nothing from the other report that they're doing, which is, checking with everybody to see surfaces and basements and things like that. We've talked about that. And as far as I know, there hasn't been any update on that as well. So I thought, now, normally we would do, well, since you don't have the agenda, you don't know, but we were gonna do comments before Mr. Geisling's presentation, but I think that a lot of questions will be raised by Mr. Geisling's presentation, so I think
That's
what
okay.
we'll do
No
is,
problem.
if
Thank you,
you're
John.
ready, John, I'm so sorry.
Should I just grab it back then?
It's connected to our Wi-Fi, but it's not connected to, I can't get it to Wi-Fi connected.
Yeah.
So unfortunately.
That's fine.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
But
it's
anyway.
okay. Like I said, I pulled together a couple presentations that I've been asked. And big picture, Newcastle County Unincorporated is a CRS community rating system community. It's a designation within FEMA that, in exchange for protecting floodplains, having higher building standards, you get points, and those points translate to reductions in flood insurance for those that have flood, senior flood insurance in your community. So, we're in our third iteration of that currently. We are a class 6 community now, and we want to go to a class 5. So when we were after we were successful in the class 6, I had put together a presentation. That was about 4 years ago. So I have that here, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But and listening to you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like to me that you want to hear what are the things that perhaps we do that keep people out of harm's way
Yes,
through our zoning code.
yes.
Okay.
And also, if there's anything that you're doing that, I understand you're trying to discourage people from developing in the floodplain. And if that is also for the benefit of the rest of the community, so that there's not, the impervious ground or whatever it would be. I don't know.
Oh, no, and I'm hitting on that, so that's
Yeah,
good.
okay, cool.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm giving you what you
Yes,
kind of want.
yes.
Second piece of all this, we updated our drainage code in April of this year. So April 2022, we updated our drainage code, which had been in place more or less, it had some minor revisions over the years, but more or less since 1998. So we did that, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So there are flooding components to it, but drainage codes are focused on providing adequate conveyance to workforces or conveyance systems of adequate capacity. So it's kind of a loaded statement, but it no adverse impact to your neighbor. For example. So if you're going to create runoff, you've got to now design a system to carry runoff to a place that has the capacity to accept it. So that's what the drainage code is all about. So with the floodplain issues and our CRS program. I talked a little bit about began the conversation with the CRS. I'm not gonna- I don't know if I'm gonna get too much into some of the stuff that you need to do, but is everyone here familiar with elevation certificates that go along with?
Each other with base.
Base flood elevation, elevation of the structure. So those.
I'm not sure everybody in the audience is, but we are.
Okay, so it big picture, so we all know what happened in Florida recently, and we've seen other instances of it. A lot of damage occurs outside of that flood. It is wise, and it's actually beneficial to have flood insurance in addition to homeowners insurance. It's a lot cheaper if you're not in a MAP floodplain. So if you're not in a MAP floodplain, the rates aren't as high, and you can still benefit from having insurance. So when you think about it, from that, if you're trying to protect your asset, that's a kind of a good way to do it, because you're not paying a high premium, yet you're getting the coverage. So one of the elements that comes along with that is an elevation certificate. So you have to have a licensed surveyor complete it's a certificate, it's 2 or 3 pages long, and it documents the type of structure, the elevation of all the floors, including the basement, the highest adjacent grade, the lowest adjacent grade, where the mechanicals are, the air conditioning system, the electrical system, all those kinds of things. So it's a detailed survey, and costs some money, probably $1,200 to $1,500 would be cost. But that's kind of what you need to, so that the insurance agency can meet, in this case, but can rate your structure. So one of the responsibilities of the community is that for all structures that are required to have insurance, they have to maintain the elevation certificates. For the community. So that's one of the key components of the CRS program.
John, can you repeat that? You said that the community has to maintain the elevation.
Maintain the certificates, copies. of
Oh,
certificates. The property, it's the property's own certificate. The community keeps copies. Right, but only for the required flood insurance, not for that's the key. Second big piece of the CRS was we got a lot of credits for preserving open space. So for our zoning code, we say you can't develop a floodplain. So by definition, if you can't develop something, it has to go into a conservation easement into the open space. So we got credit for all those many thousands of acres that were reserved.
How did you, could you go through that again? You not allowing development in the floodplain, is that what you said? At all?
Correct. So developments, so we adopted the UDC in 1990. Since 1998, there's been a lot of development, certainly focused south of Coquihalla, south of Route 40. All those developments that were alongside rivers and streams placed all of that floodplain into conservation, into open space. Did touch it. But we got credit for all those thousands of acres.
And that credit toward your flood, for your class of in the FEMA
Yeah.
for insurance?
Yeah, without that, we wouldn't have made it. We wouldn't have been able to get anywhere close to what we got. So that was a big component of that. So that's part of the zoning code is, directing development away from the floodplains. So that was key. But of course, we have tens of thousands of structures in the floodplain as a result of legacy development. That's the other side of it. But, so if a structure were to burn down, if a structure were to be damaged by a flood greater than 50% of its current value, and that does happen, and it does happen, that you have to get a realtor to assess it, or an appraisal, and make that determination before you issue any permits to build back. So we're lucky in a way, because we haven't been hit by a single disaster that's impacted thousands of homes. It hasn't happened to us. Hasn't probably happened to you. I don't know. I don't think so. Right? But in Florida, it just had happened, and other places it's happened, and then everything just goes crazy because.
So if something is destroyed in the floodplain, that's a legacy, are they able to build back up?
They can build back, but they have to build back to the new higher standard.
What's your elevation you're at right now? And you're
18 inches
above, what, 9 feet or?
above the base flood,
what's
So
your-
whatever the base flood is. So there's a whole,
Oh, it depends on where you are.
yeah, it always depends on where you are. There's all kinds of tools to get that, but yeah. So 18 inches above that base flood.
Mhm.
And I'll kind of hit on it at the end. We looked at some other scenarios like 30 inches. So that.
But this is only for rebuilding because there's no.
So look for rebuilding, yeah, or fire,
Right.
right.
Okay.
Or, we don't see, I guess we do see some of it. They do in certainly other parts of the country where developers come in and buy the whole block, raise it and redevelop it. That happens in other parts of the country. I haven't seen much of that here, but we see it every once in a while, lot by lot basis. So, Then enclosures below the lowest floor can only be used for parking. And then, So only for parking. So that's part of that. If you're in a floodplain, you obviously you can't have a basement. You have to elevate the structure, so either on a crawl space with vents. You have to elevate beyond a certain point. You can use that area below if there's enough headroom for parking. You might have to have door access and stairs or something. You do that, of course, you can get that as well. But that's one of the requirements of building in a floodplain, that no unvented space is enclosed anywhere below the base flood.
But again, this is just for buildings that are legacy, right? For spaces that are
New or rebuilt.
within the same footprint of the old building or on a, you know what I mean? Like, you can't build anything new in the floodplain.
You can't build anything new. Well, you can seek special permission.
Oh, you can.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right,
And that does happen, but once a year. It does
okay.
happen. And then we adopted, and you have that here, you may be familiar with the wave zone or what we call the V zone. And then beyond the V zone, there's a limit of moderate wave action zone. And that is 1.5 to 3 feet of wave height. So what we did, we adopted that the V zone, which is required, but also the LIMWA, they call it limited wave action. That zone, they all be built to the coastal high hazard standard, which is the piers. So like the beach homes that you see. We don't get too much of that. So, some down along the coastal Fort Penn area, north of Fort Penn, Delaware City, south of Delaware City. There's a little bit of that we get. And you got a couple of examples. So those are the higher standards some of the higher standards we incorporated into our building code and zoning codes. We also require developers to map the floodplains. The big problem with maps is that some of the maps don't come along with elevations attached to the flood source. So if you don't have the elevation, you got to figure it out. And for a property owner, it's too much work. They can't sustain the cost of trying to figure something out.
So FEMA hasn't done that for other properties? No, I guess
No,
not.
no, you can submit for elevation, but you have to go out and do all the work. People don't do it. So what we did was say, okay, if somebody's going to develop something, 5 lots or 5 acres in development, they have to do that. And we've gotten a lot of mapping done, like, well, I'll be, call it for free, right? So the mapping done for free. And there's a process, there's a technical process where it's all handled by FEMA, but in the end, a map revision comes out. So we get all that updated mapping for free. And then we also, in order to protect the floodplains, no rise. So if you're building near the floodplain, or within the floodplain, which happens rarely, you can't zero rise, 0.0 rise. Other parts of the country. Rise means, if I condense the floodplain, the water surface will go up. So,
Oh, I see.
so the minimum at the standard in the National Flood Insurance Program is you can raise that no more than a foot, per se.
By putting an obstacle like.
By putting an obstacle in a
Right.
structure, et cetera.
Yeah. uh-huh.
Filling part of what they call the flood fringe. And in doing so, you raise the flood elevation, but you can't do it no more than a foot. What we say, you can't do it at all. You can't raise it at all. So, and then we also put it in net fill, and require compensatory storage for any filling. But then again, filling requires a variance. So talk a little bit about when they say, oh, there's a prohibition on filling, yes, but there's a path. But we don't get many, we get some. But there's some projects that it's just unavoidable, right?
So it's like where you have a wetlands and you have to, if you take the wetland, you have to put it somewhere else at the same time.
Mitigation, yeah.
Yeah.
Same as mitigation. Yeah. And then there's other parts to the CRS program that you're going to, do you have mobile homes?
I don't think we have any mobile homes here.
Okay. There's special provisions that you need to consider with mobile homes. You've got to anchor them, and you got to elevate that. There's they call it horizontal core that supports the home, and that piece has to be elevated 3 feet above the flood source, because mobile homes historically get 25 foot. So the idea is to protect. The CRS program asks you to look at all your historical flooding and flood claims and try to group them into areas, and then try to describe, well, how can you begin to remove that risk. So it's a good exercise. It's a good planning exercise. So you evaluate all the flood claims. You have to get the data from people because it's all private. So all you know is that there's a claim at this address. You can't share that information. You have to be discreet about it. But you can take the information, aggregate it, and say, oh, there's a lot of flooding in this area. There's a lot of flooding in that area. Oh, why is that? What causes that? So part of this CRS is to ask me to evaluate that and look at ways you can improve that flooding situation. So that's a little bit with the CRS, and I mentioned that we updated our drainage code just this past spring. So one thing that we've realized in the county is that we spend a lot of money doing water quality, water improvement projects, maintaining stormwater facilities, inspecting stormwater facilities, permitting stormwater facilities, repairing stormwater facilities. So we thought it's best that we attempt to bring forth a code that does two things. It makes the future stormwater facilities more resilient, with better products, requiring less capital maintenance, and then also improves water quality. So most municipalities, most of Delaware, not all Delaware, but most of Delaware is under an EPS permit from EPA, and it's passed down through the state, and then the state passes it down to municipalities and DelDOT, and anybody that kind of manages the land. And part of that permit is that you have to show improvements in the water quality of streams.
That's your permit to put stormwater into the river, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay,
And the permit itself has been around for over 20 years. And each cycle, it gets stricter and stricter. So it just keeps raising the ante in terms of what you're supposed to prevent and how the systems have to be maintained, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's an incredible long-term cost for all communities, all municipal governments to maintain the infrastructure. Long time ago, probably over 30 years, the county used to create open spaces that were public, and call them public space, and they put little parks. And you see them around, you drive through some of the little communities, look at these little park structures that, and they'll have a sign that says Newcastle County. And they recognize that, a long time ago, that going forward, that was not going to be a wise investment. So they started creating private open space and said to the community as well, the developer can propose to do something, or you guys can all get together and do something, but whatever you want to do. So we place the burden for maintaining all these systems on those private communities. Well, it's already beginning to show its age, and communities either fail to maintain facilities or they just plain burn out. And they don't even, it's upwards of repair stormwater facility.
what is the stormwater facility? Is that like a drainage system?
The drainage system, yeah, like the classic big pond,
Okay,
so if maybe it's a big dry pond or it's a big wet pond, there's a lot of those. And then as time has moved on, we've added different types of facilities, so you'll see these fire retention gardens, rain gardens, that essentially smaller ponds that are kind of filled with a biomedia that's supposed to filter the stormwater and support plants, et cetera, et cetera. We have thousands of stormwater. And they all have to be inspected. They all have to be maintained by private entities. Cost of those facilities that go bad and seek help from the government to repair them is significant. So part of the rewriting the drainage code again was to promote higher standards for the materials used in constructing stormwater facilities, and then also to require enhanced treatment of water quality in new communities, not new communities and new developments, by requiring us to treat more of whatever the existing impervious cover was. So when you redevelop something, it's the best and only time to treat the water that was there. So if you have a three acres and it was a small building and a parking lot, and you come in and redevelop that, well, the state code says you just have to treat 15%, just 15%. We just said, okay, we made it 50%, so you have to treat now 50%. And by doing that, we can take credit for that additional 35% and take that credit into our permit, because our permit is still in its infancy in terms of we're not associating compliance with the actual chemical measurements in streams. We're associating performance with how much of the impervious cover in the watershed is being treated.
When you say being treated, how would it be treated?
It's filtered,
Oh, okay,
it's filtered or settled in some fashion.
okay, all right.
That's essentially what treatment is. So,
With the idea that that's going to improve water quality.
but that's gonna, if well maintained
Uh-huh.
over time, it will improve. So by taking those credits, then we can show compliance with our permit without spending money to do that. Because otherwise, then we have to go out and seek areas that are untreated and then to get projects to treat that water. Because we have to treat 3% of the impervious cover every permit cycle. So 3% of 20,000 acres in a watershed is a lot of acres to treat. So if we can accumulate the credits over time by having a higher standard, we can show that we're meeting that without spending any money.
So you are taking the burden from the county and putting it on the individual private landowner, basically, right?
Yeah.
And are you getting credits for the CRS?
Not
rating?
from that, no,
No.
not directly, no.
But that prevents you from getting fined, I guess, by the,
Yeah, because we have a permit obligation.
right.
So there's two things. There's CRS is voluntary. It impacts the insurance
Insurance, right.
premium rate. The drainage code is a development standard that developers that want to do project activity. So we want to improve water quality. I mentioned that we spent a lot of money. The data I had at the time, we had spent $16 million on repairs since 2004. And those costs are only going to rise. And there's a backlog. So what we're doing is we got some money from the state a few years ago. And they began matching some of that money from the state. So they created a fund and they created a list of stormwater facilities that need to be built. And they evaluated the cost of everyone on the list, and then they started performing the work. That was 2004. And they still have a big backlog. So, and more, I think more get added than get removed. So long term, we're going to need a funding source. So we did develop a funding source. Probably not enough, but we did. That charges new communities a flat rate. They pay into a fund that's supposed to be used. Doesn't have to be in that community, but later for some other community. And that's all managed.
It's like a fee on top of whatever else is going on.
Yeah, it's kind of like a user fee.
Yeah.
An impact fee, yeah. So they have that money. But it's like I said, it's not gonna be, it's somewhere in the $9 per lot or something. Maybe in the big picture.
And that's assessed to each property owner?
Just once, though. Just the developer pays it. But each lot pays ongoing annual maintenance as well. So they have to do all the grass cutting, all the minor repairs, the sediment removal, the weeding, for example, and any new type of maintenance that's required to maintain the facility. They have to do themselves. So they get charged somewhere about $400.
That's like to a
Through a homeowner's corporation. We have all these costs that, together, and then some communities, after a while, they just don't do it very well. They just don't. So maybe they have trouble collecting the fees for that. We do help them there, by putting it on the tax book, So eventually it gets paid. So, I mentioned the 50% treatment, and we made efforts to improve the slopes on newly graded land. So we wouldn't have stagnant standing water on lots. We implemented what's called as-built survey of the final lot and the construction. Other municipalities do it, the city of Newark does it. What we would previously did was rely on what we call grading inspections by building inspectors. And they were more interested in the building, and they were more interested in did the water drain away from the structure? Not so much did the water stay in the backyard.
Yeah.
And we've had some real problems over the years, where homes get built in some kind of sequence, and maybe a couple homes in the middle don't get built, and all of a sudden the water won't drain from one end to the other anymore. Or somebody built something high in the middle, and now it can't get past. We also required that all common drainage easements and elements, so all swales, all pipes, go into the open space. Now, we have an advantage because 50% of the land is open space, so there's quite a bit of land to utilize. So we're not placing any drainage pipes or open channels on people's personal private lots. That was a big shift. Because what we found is we couldn't enforce it. Because it was the maintenance corporation's responsibility to enforce the drainage easement. And when we pitted one neighbor against another, and maybe the activity that they did did not require a permit, it could have been a garden, it could have been a shed. And they just placed it in the drainage easement. And then we had to fight, trying to get through. So we said, all right, we're just going to move all those into private open space, with the idea that sometime in the future we'll have a stormwater utility and we'll have utility and all the conveyance systems, and at least all these newer. The older community is going to always be a problem.
So you're saying 50% of the property, 50% of the land in the flood zone in the county is open space? Is that-
100% of the land in the floodplain is safe. 50% of the land in the development is safe.
Oh,
So you don't have that issue here, so I don't know, you don't have these large tracts of land.
no, we do have some, but
Right.
we have one right now. Yeah, that's interesting. You know,
But it's a good idea to, if you have common conveyance, I don't know if the city accepts responsibility for the storm pipes that are outside the right of way.
I don't know.
Yeah, so that was the issue that we had. So we accepted zero responsibility for anything, but it would either be the maintenance corporation or Delta, essentially, always, in every case. However, not everybody looked at it that way, well, wait a minute, that's, I got a sinkhole, you guys should come out and do something about it, So we still get those questions and concerns, but we never go out and fix anything. Our government doesn't fix anything on on somebody's lot. We help them try to figure out who owns it,
Mhm.
and then they have to work with that entity, whatever that entity is. But, we have to, and we have so many issues with rock swells, collapsed pipes, and we said, well, we just gotta get it into a place where it's more likely than not to be, left alone. And we also upgraded we get videos of all the conveyance systems now. To require a professional engineer to view the video, and what the contractors do, and they do it for Delta, is they'll, after they install a long run of pipe, they run a video in, and at each joint, the camera stops, runs a circle, and they go all over through it. It's all tracked by how many feet from the beginning of the pipe, how many feet, they know exactly where everything is. So, they do that, and then they make all the repairs that are necessary. Then they run it again, and that's what they submit. They don't just submit something that shows all kinds of problems. Because that doesn't really help anybody. So we at least have that documentation. So we think, hey, we know that the conveyance system that this community is about to inherit, that they know nothing about, is likely to last for a long period of time. We believe that. So we're only using concrete pipes or the HDPE pipes, the hard, heavy plastic pipes. Or Delta uses them now too. They'll last well over 50, 75 years. Right? So, we believe that's good. We don't allow any underground stormwater facilities in residential areas.
The underground what? I'm sorry.
Stormwater facilities, there's
Oh,
a lot of underground.
oh, you mean like
stormwater-
tanks? Or-
Tanks, yeah, tanks, rain tanks, there's rain tanks, there's, storm tech systems that go underground.
You don't allow this?
But not in residential, we allow them in commercial.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
What about mixed?
Hmm?
What about mixed
Mixed what?
communities?
Oh, that's a good question. So they are, it depends on how they're owned. So if they're a apartment, then yes, because they're owned by a single owner.
If it's condos, single
Bill?
dwelling.
Sorry. We'll be able to.
Yeah, I'll certainly, I'll get, yeah. Yep, talk about the drainage easements, yep, this is good. Talk about the crossover between the drainage code and, the floodplain regulations. We now require that project plans to fit the 500-year flood elevation, not for any regulatory requirement, just for information. We're probably gonna do something with that.
Say that again.
So if you're familiar with flood maps, they'll show a 1% or 100-year flood risk, but they'll also show a 0.2 or 500-year flood risk. Now, it's just a placeholder for later. I think something's going to come of that.
So you were requiring what now?
That if there is a 500-year flood elevation and information that you show,
Oh, I see. Okay.
it's just a way of hoping. Just say, hey, look at this.
Mhm. That's interesting. Placeholder, that's interesting.
It's a placeholder, yeah.
Mhm.
It's one of the, it's kind of like you get it, you get people used to doing it, and then when you introduce the restriction with that line in mind, it's not quite a shock,
Right,
because they've seen it before.
right.
And then there's an element of, in a hydraulically critical area, which could be a sump or a catch basin is in a condition where it's underwater on all sides. In those areas, we have protections about any structures that would be at or near that location. So it's another effort to keep structures out of harm's way that may be located far away from the water course, but close to a hydraulically critical area in the community. Everybody knows what, those kind of, where they are, like an underpass is a good example, where it always floods under an underpass. Well, if you know that, then you don't go build something next to that, because it's likely that it's going to flood, or the water can't get out of there for a long period of time. So you don't build there. So. That's it, basically. And then we did a little, I don't know how much mapping services you have in the city of Newcastle. We have a decent GIS mapping group, and we began to look at different scenarios. Sea level rise, we take the, I think it was 0.58 meters rise. Because we were going through a comprehensive plan update this past year, and we called it NCC 2050. What we did is we were going to show this to anybody, but we took the high confidence, 95% confidence sea level rise, I think it was 0.58 meters, overlaid that with the 18-inch and 30-inch freeboards on the rivers, and kind of just see how much land all that encompassed.
Quite a bit. Wendy.
Really a lot. Yeah, we didn't share it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? So the county decided to develop in the floodplain in 1998, is that right?
Yes.
So what about those property owners that were in the floodplain, but had, property that they expected to develop at some point? Was there a lot of problem with property owners and private owners about that change?
Not a lot of problem. There was there's a piece called beneficial use in the code that basically says that if you have a property and the development code takes away all development from it, and that's indeed what the development code did, because you have to, first thing you have to do in any development exercise is you have to evaluate the site capacity. And if something is 100% fully protected, you have zero development potential. So if half of the property is 100% protected, you have 50% of the property development. So then that becomes your base. So if you had a property that was 100% in the floodplain, you had no development potential. So that was the case. Under beneficial use, you could make the argument in front of the Board of Adjustment, in front of the Resource Protection Technical Advisory Committee, Environmental Board, that you could build. We want to build that was consistent with other properties in the area, but you had to build it to the flood standard. You couldn't build it to a lower standard. You had to build it to the standard.
So there were a lot of people who were able to use.
There were
it
a
for
few,
their property.
just a few though, yeah. The development community, most property is not 100% in the flood. And I think you probably have more of that here than here.
Yeah, we had a floodplain here.
Oh, I know, I mean, I've looked at maps.
Yeah,
A lot of maps, and yeah, I would assume you have that here, so it's a little different, right? So especially when you have streets and utilities and right in front of that. Yeah. So you would advocate, you would advocate for a higher building standard, but not a prohibition.
I just have one more question. I apologize for.
Yeah.
But you said earlier, I think, that when you build, you had to show that that stormwater drainage was going to a place where there was room for it, is that right? So let's say we don't have a prohibition of development in the floodplain. So if that development is right on the river and the river is,
Oh, you could send it to the
where could
river.
you can send it to the river even though the river is high? I mean, is it?
Well, it's always gonna have, I mean, it's not always gonna be high, right? So, but if it's always high, then you don't wanna build, because then, you're underwater, but,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so you could send it to the river. You wouldn't have to have a retention pool or anything
No,
like that.
no, it'd be no use doing that.
Oh, there would, no use doing that. Why is that?
Because the river's so big and development is so small. Now, you look in those instances, you look for more quality, water quality component of the development. So the filtering of the storm,
Right,
that's what you're.
right. There's a lot of stuff that happens on the shore that can't get into the river.
Exactly, yeah. So that's what we strive.
You said the county inspects stormwater facilities, just the ones that the county maintains or
All of them.
private?
Under the permit, so when we talk about the NPDES permit, it's a big hook. So it puts you on the hook for everything. It puts every municipality in this country that has a certain public population size is in the NPDES program, and they're doing things all in different ways. It's like a big laboratory. So yes, they're obligated to inspect every one of those facilities. Yeah.
Even private.
Oh, private, yeah, absolutely, because they're part of the permit.
But how does the county select which sites to inspect?
So they decided, right now they inspect the residential facilities every year, and then non-residential facilities less often, I don't know. Yeah.
Like a shopping center?
It's a big job, it's a huge job.
Like a shopping center would require?
Yeah. And we do get they don't come to our office, but a lot of people, a lot of private developers, owners of private property, if they see a problem, they will contact one of their engineers, private engineers, to evaluate it, and then that engineer will often come to me. I get questions like frequently, but they're not making those changes, submit those changes to me, but they'll work with our public works department to make a repair to it. So we get that quite often.
What do we call
Yeah.
it?
Quite often.
What is your department?
Land use.
Here in Lincoln?
We're the kind of development, forward facing part of the government. We're the ones that issue all the building permits.
Because we have one building officer
Right,
who, we have a CRS rating of 8.
right.
And he does that along with everything else he does.
Oh, it's too much, right?
Yeah.
I can't do what I'm obligated to do. It's too much right now.
I did find out that Bill Barthel is our floodplain manager now.
You're new?
Our city administrator is our floodplain.
Oh,
manager.
okay, yeah. Well, it's, we didn't contract out for it this time, but we have contracted it out in the past. But due to the peculiarities of each community, it's often, you end up doing the work twice because, well, you have a relationship with AECom, and I know Dave,
Mhm.
and so, what you were saying earlier, I'm just aware of that. And somebody like that, because they know you well, they've been involved.
Right.
They're not asking somebody on city staff to say, can you give me all this, can you give me all that? if I have to go get it all, I'm not do it, you know? So,
Within the city of Newcastle, so does DENREC inspect stormwater ponds?
the conservation district. So, whatever your relationship is with conservation.
Well,
district.
Kevin Donnelly's doing it, right?
Right. Yeah. They have the delegation.
Other questions?
We have a number of historic
Mhm.
buildings in the floodplain. And so that unincorporated parts of the county don't.
Yes and no. Well, so, and I'm not an expert on the story piece of it, but, our code says anything older than 50 years is potentially historic. So we have a lot of building stock that's over 50 years, so it gets looked at. I think when we wrote that, I think they wrote it 20, 25 years ago. They thought 50 years ago was maybe old. But now, that's the stuff that was built in the 70s and 80s, not the 80s yet. But, yeah, and that stuff's just commonplace, you know? So, but there are some different exemptions for historic in the National Flood Insurance Program, yes. Yeah, because they realize you can't alter the structure.
So if the,
It won't be the same structure anymore.
if the city was to contemplate modifications to its development codes, what, besides the drainage code, what,
You probably don't even have a drainage code, very few municipalities.
besides the county's drainage code, what other parts of the development codes would we look at as a guide?
Oh, the zoning code, you wanna direct development away from where you don't want it to where you want it. So,
I'm just looking for a resource that we could read.
just read,
Which sections of the, was it the Unified Development Code?
Article 10 of the Unified Development Code, yeah.
Is that floodplain code or something?
That's the
like that?
environmental protection standard portion of the code. It covers floodplains, wetlands, forests. Yeah, well, we did forest. Around the same time, we did the drainage bill. And we're trying to protect stands of forests. Some fragment.
Any more questions from the members here? All right, so we'll open it up to the audience. The people who are here, please state your name and your address. And then you have 3 minutes to make any comments, or if you have a question, I think Mr. Geisler will take questions, right? Tom? Yeah, okay. Nobody have a question? Yes.
When you talk
Your
about,
name,
I'm sorry,
your name and
my
your
name is
address.
Renee Rousseau, I live at 24 East Sixth Street. When you said that developers have to develop floodplain maps, who do they go to do that for them?
FEMA will do that. Oh, who did they get to do it?
Yeah,
They're private engineers.
and are they local people?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So those maps that we have of what our town is going to look like in 50 years is a floodplain map that was developed by people like that.
It was, that map that you're talking about probably is the firm map, flood insurance rate map.
Oh,
It's all been digitized now, so when people talk about flood maps now, they see the whole picture. Used to be, you had to roll out these panels and unfold them, and then find your street and, kind of say, well, I think it's right about here, and then estimate the elevation based off that location information. Now it's all digitized, and so when you see a flood map now, you're looking at a pretty picture with an aerial photograph underneath it, so you can actually see landmarks that you're familiar with and say, I know where that is. Yes, all those maps, were developed by FEMA. The map revisions, done by private engineering firms.
Okay, and my second question is, when you were talking about private people paying a certain amount, how realistic is that really? I mean, do people actually cough up that money
Or,
if they want to build or protect if they belong to like an HOA,
they have to, yeah,
they have to? Because, I mean, I've known people who lived in POA where to try to get people to pay the money just for the POA, which has nothing to do with drainage protection.
so you see it,
Every year.
yeah, these are called maintenance corporations. And there's a difference between a maintenance corporation and a civic association. Sometimes they're called homeowners organizations, but they're really maintenance corporations. And they're obligated by deed to pay the fee. If they don't pay the fee, they can go into default. I don't know that I would expect there are issues. I haven't heard of any issues yet. So it's somewhere, $4 to $5, or maybe up to $800. It depends on what per year. Depends on what service you're getting. Some of these communities, you get everything done for you. Others, you maintain your lot. But some communities want golf club quality living space. And there are many of them that like that.
I can give you a quick answer. I was looking into a flood certificate. So I could get a ballpark estimate on flood insurance for
Okay.
for my home on the Strand. And this survey or engineering company is, I don't know, it's someone in Salem.
Oh, Mark, yeah, right.
Right, and I called and they said, yeah, we can do that. We'll have the surveyor call. And I said, fine, I'm just looking for ballpark estimate because I've approached an insurance company. And then I was very surprised to find out that just to have the surveyor come out is $800 to $1,200.
Yeah, I said 12 to 15.
Getting without elevation.
And that's for my little small lot on the street.
Oh, yeah. Yep, it's quite possible. But they'll carry, it's not just the survey, they carry through the submission of the information if you need it submitted.
Like you said, they're gonna find out the level of the basement.
Right.
All the electronics, so.
Right. But you need it to accurately rate the insurance agent to rate it.
I think I'm gonna go out and buy some sandbags.
Yeah. Well,
Other questions, anyone?
Yeah, Phil Gross, 1301 13th Street. We had started with my question about the difference between the projects being single home, mixed apartment, and when I say mixed, we're talking about mixed individual housing, mixed condo, mixed rental, mixed. What's the difference in views of the stormwater and that type?
So we've done mixed use developments and the way that's been handled is they create two separate maintenance corporations. So one for the fee simple and another for the apartment style, the rental type where you only own the interior of the unit, you don't own the exterior. But they all share the same common amenities. So maybe there's walking paths, maybe there's a tennis court, maybe there's a swimming pool. So it can be tricky, but that's what they do. So the two maintenance corporations, and then they pay different rates. But you gotta realize the people that don't own the home, or if it's in a condo, they do own the home, so they pay a proportion or something. There's the single entity, the owner, that's paying that maintenance fee. So, all the other ones are paying a pro rata, per unit charge.
So when the project's set up,
Yeah.
the fees will get worked out, but as far as the state's view of the project, they would treat,
I don't know the state, I mean,
and the county,
well, the county, so it's done as a legal filing. They're creating a corporation, they're filing corporation papers, they're creating bylaws. The improvements have to be turned over, and there's a process for turning them over. So,
gotcha. And I guess question, how does one get a copy of the interim report that was submitted to city council?
Oh,
Is that posted anywhere?
yeah, I thought I might have, I sort of limited the stuff I brought with me. But, do you need it right away, or can I bring it to the next meeting? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll do that.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Question?
all right.
John, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you like to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're welcome to do that, but also if if you want to get home, I totally understand. And I really
Well, the
appreciate
Phillies
it.
are on tonight,
Huh? I know, it's very exciting. to
All
all
right,
the people.
yeah, but-
You know, so mostly women here, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the reason, but anyway, I'm kind of sexist, I apologize. Anyway, okay,
That's fine.
so the next thing,
I think I have enough.
next thing I want to talk about is the letter that we got from Karen. I sent it around to everybody. And I'm gonna read the three things that she asked for in this letter, okay? That the task force make a recommendation to the planning commission to not change the zoning to allow the flats at River Edge to be built. There are several reasons why this is problematic, but relevant to this issue is the destruction of pristine land close by the river will surely create more flooding and only exacerbate our problems. I understand that the land could be developed as industrial now, but any delay in developing the land is one more day. We don't create more work for the commission that we've put in place to address sea level rise. Not to mention that the site will surely cause more runoff into the river and must stop polluting the already toxic rivers. Second is that the task force use city funding to hire an environmental consultant to delineate the various ecosystems in our city limits. And this way we can be sure that we're keeping our wetlands area as well as bordering ecosystems functioning at full capacity. There are piles of dirt, one of them obviously with dirt removed on the site of Lickens Drive now, and I can only imagine they are filling in wet areas now. Some of these things were actually discussed, right, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, we must keep our wetlands in place to help mitigate any flooding we can through these natural means. And lastly, the city under the task force help educate and incentivize property owners to adopt watershed and wetland friendly behaviors, such as installing rain barrels, rain gardens, rewilding yards, and other mitigation methods like those listed here. Now, there are three, each one of these had a link to a website, and this was the wetland, let's see. Oh, this one is, so the rivers and streams are the most polluted in the US, a new report says. This was from March of this year, reported up by the NPR. The wetlands, let's see, documents flooding. Yeah, this was the wetlands help reduce flooding, and also you can help wetlands and watersheds. I think this is a really interesting article, and I don't have any even discussed, but to me, it's pretty such a no-brainer to tell people that they can do things to help to reduce flooding. You know, I think that's pretty much. And we are going to be, yeah, yeah,
No, we just read.
Yeah.
Can I take a look at that, or you're still using it?
I'm sorry?
Can I take a look at that, or you're still
The
using it?
letter, sure, oh, yeah. But we are gonna be doing, more with the website and letting people know what they can do, and I certainly would like to incorporate some of that in there. But, so I would like people in the task force to comment on those things that were requested by Karen.
So I'll start.
Okay,
because
good.
I'm on the planning
Yes,
commission.
please.
And I really think items 1 and 2 should come to us as public comment. I mean, we were here for 3.5 hours last night, I think, looking at this, the project. And, but appreciate your comment, but I really think that should come to us as public comment. So, thank you for that. But the third one.
Reducing, what about the second one? Because the first one, if there were not already in the planning commission, I think would be something we could address. But the second one about toxic runoff, I'm not sure that that's under our bailiwick. You know what I mean? Like, I totally agree that we should reduce that, but I'm not sure that has anything to do with sea level flooding and things like that. So I think that's something we should maybe not address. I don't know if anybody has any.
Agree. Yeah, agree.
The first one, I think that the project that's going on right now is going on right now at the planning commission and at the city council level. And I don't think we have any right to put our 2 cents in there unless it is an emergency, some emergency, and I don't see that right now.
The planning commission has it right now. We're doing our due diligence and we will make a recommendation. We have to follow a lot of very code specific things. And then we will make a recommendation to council.
Can I ask you a question about that though? The runoff, they have, I was talking to a gentleman from Denrick yesterday. And I think it was yesterday, Mr. Varga, who is the floodplain manager for the state. Now, he can't do anything specifically in any community because this is what he calls a home rule state. And everybody, every county, every municipality has to make their own rules about this kind of thing. But he said, I haven't been able to find anybody who can tell me that a development in the floodplain will increase flooding anywhere else. What they talk about is that there might be damage, like a loss of building there will just result eventually in the damage and therefore it's not worth building, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like your insurance will be sky high, blah, blah, blah. But what about the runoff? He said every plan has to build in a large runoff plan in the stormwater plan. Is that, I assume that this has that already built in, right? So, yeah. I don't know. I have been, seriously, I've been asking everybody about this. If you build it, you heard Jeff Bergstrom say that wouldn't matter. David Athey said it didn't matter. This guy says as long as you build it in the stormwater thing, it's not going to really matter that much. It sounds anti-intuitive to me, but everybody's saying it. So I don't know what to say. I mean, we have to look at facts. If these are the facts, I think we gotta go with them. And I think you make a political decision, you make a decision like the county does to get rid of all development. And that seems to be a reasonable thing to me to do, just because you prevent all these other problems, but I don't think you can do that based on the fact that this development is going to cause flooding. Am I wrong? Please tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, so the proposed development, I mean, it's a huge number of acres and a lot of it's wetland and they're not touching that. So what we're really evaluating is out of the floodplain.
Out of the floodplain totally? That's what John was saying, right? That even those developments that, even though they prohibited development in the floodplain, most of the properties had areas that were not in the floodplain.
But I think, you know, what we also need to consider, is sea level rise and communities going to last till the end of the century, and there's projected sea level rise, right? And that's why, you know, I know you volunteered to look at current code, and to take those things into consideration.
Well, that's what John was talking about, the 500 year, right? The placeholder. I thought that was interesting. You know, that you could just say, well, we have to look at the 500 year, and in certain instances, we will use that as our guide. I'm assuming that's what that means, rather than at the 100 year, which is what it is right now. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, all right, so hold on a second. Everybody had their say, yes, yes? Anybody else have anything to say? Okay, all right. Okay, all right, Renee, you want to?
So what you're saying is that if people want to build in the floodplain and it doesn't impact anybody but them.
Yeah, that's the
you let it.
impression. That's what the engineers are telling me. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but look great.
I read all sorts of sources that say,
Pardon me?
I read a lot of sources and publications that are seemingly from good sources, you know, educated and well-informed, you know,
Yes.
environmentalists.
Mary Ann, would you say?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. My name is Mary Ann Cabot, and I live at 49 West Third Street. Disagree with that, differ. I mean, there definitely are, and I've had people at DENREC. I've had discussions with DENREC people about the issues that we've had here in the city in flooded areas and past development. And they seem to be at odds with the decisions that were made in the city.
Yeah, I was looking.
Clearly, and I mean, in-depth conversations with DENREC officials, and, you know, they explained why they just don't interfere, you know, they had no input, nor did they care to, you know. But, you know, with allowing for, like, even if you're not in the floodplain, you know, allowing for whatever you're going to do to move water, I mean, you have to move, it has to be displaced if you're going to do construction and you're around wetlands and everything. I mean, are you, like when he said, well, you can direct all the water into the river, you know, because, you know, the river, you know, it's high and it's low and it's wide and it's deep and all of that, but the truth is, you're still displaced. I mean, the water has to go someplace. And I mean, I live on Battery Park. So that river breaches its banks. That water breaches the banks very often. Well, you know, you see it too. You know, we have bad storms and a lot of work has been done, you know, to mitigate the flooding and the water problems. And yet I still have to see, I mean, I live on Battery Park and we still have water issues. You know, you can't resolve all of the issues the water brings. So some of what I heard tonight, and I apologize, this is my first time to make one of these, but some of it I really surprised me and seemed to go against some other things that I've read and I thought I had learned about, you know.
I don't think there's any conflict. I mean, John clearly stated that in the county, you can't build in the floodplain.
Right, right.
Well,
But I
they
think what-
do with
what
they
I
do
think-
with restrictions.
What Gail is saying as far as the planning of this is that the building is not in the floodplain.
Correct,
Yeah,
but surrounded by wetland.
yeah. You can have a property that's
And
partially in
floodplain
the
area.
floodplain and partially out of it.
And we have a lot of that here. The city, we have a lot.
Yeah.
With a lot that are in it now that weren't.
Mhm.
You know, I think there's going to be another revision of the map in the next few years. So I think we're going to find
Having a
more.
property
of our
with a
cities.
portion of the property in the floodplain
Well, the
doesn't.
sea level rise.
Yeah, inevitable.
Yeah, so maybe the idea is then to use a floodplain based on an estimate, but that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of iffy, isn't it? I mean, and again, I think we would only be doing that prospectively. You know, if these guys have a plan to not build in the floodplain, I don't think we can now say to them, oh, we changed the floodplain. You know, now
Well,
that they've done
you-
all that work.
See,
I'm sorry, but
that-
it's just the
that's-
case.
Nobody else is going to.
You know what, Mary Ann?
We don't have the.
I have been
power
Googling.
card.
I've been trying to find somebody that will tell me that building in a floodplain increases flooding, and I have not found it.
I'll send it to you.
Please do.
I will.
And would you give me the name of the people at Denrec you spoke to? I'd love to talk to them.
I don't know that I can find the name, but that's been a few years.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'll share exactly what I can recall from the conversation.
Well, I just need a name. I need to know. Yes, Suzanne.
Suzanne Souter, West Fourth Street. From what Mr. Athey said and things I have read, I don't think you can make a blanket statement that building in the floodplain always increases flooding because it depends on the geography of the area. If, I believe at an earlier meeting, somebody mentioned Ellicott City. That's a creek running through a town with higher ground around it. They built on the higher ground. The water was all forced into this narrow creek and it flooded the city twice within 5 years. We don't have that kind of geography here. We have a large river system with many wetlands around it. And so paving 10 acres here or 5 acres there, yes, it adds water to the river, but as a proportion of the total river system, it's very small amount. And
That's-
therefore, it doesn't increase flooding in other parts of the area. Now, as the river continues to rise, that's going to change. And the engineers can calculate, paving 10 acres displaces X gallons of water per, hour or whatever in a heavy rainstorm and calculate what difference that makes. But I don't think you're ever going to find a blanket statement that it always increases, development always increases flooding or development never increases flooding because it depends on the geography of the area.
Well, I think this is what Jeff was saying last month. We were talking about, I said, well, we had this development in the upper Susquehanna River, and that's why I flooded in lower New York. And the reason he said was because that was not tidal. That was all that water was coming right down. Whereas here, the tidal makes it a whole lot different to build here than it would be to build up there. You really are covering places that should be spread out, water spread out. In any case, yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, that's what we've heard from Jeff and from David and from this fellow, David Warren, today. And he's the floodplain manager for the state. And, I expected that to be, him to be, good for you, stop that development and everything. And I did not get that. from him.
And I don't mean that to say that this isn't important, that we don't need to make decisions, but simply to say that you can't make a blanket statement that development in the floodplain always increases flooding for the surrounding areas.
Now, I think, people are probably disappointed I said this, but I think that there are plenty of reasons why you wouldn't be in favor of this development. But all I'm saying is from our point of view right now, I don't see any way that we can say we shouldn't do it because of development in the floodplain.
Well, I think it's tough for us. Because now you kind of put us in, not you, but now it puts us in kind of like a bad spot, because there's a lot of unknowns that we just don't.
Yeah, we don't
know.
have the plans. We haven't looked at it or anything like
A
that.
lot of unknowns. So I think when we talk about that, like that's a big thing to say something like that, or to put it back and saying no, because there's just so many unknowns, and it's been in the works. It's probably been in the works for 3 years. We just don't know about it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just one of those things.
Based on current code. Although the zoning, I guess, is the only different thing that would need to be changed, I gather, right? What do you want to say?
Comprehensive plan, zoning.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. So those are questions that are open, but are not really within our bailiwick, zoning and things like that. So I know it's disappointing. I get it. But I just, and I do think going forward, we should think about, like John said, about the county, prohibiting all development in the floodplain, just for reasons of futures for, the floodplain, and also for damage to properties that might be built there. And, it's like, as who was saying, I guess, Phil, about they're all wiped out now, and there's no reason. They should not never have allowed that perhaps, because of that reason.
So it would be interesting to look at the county code in that area.
Yeah,
and
I think
compare
so,
it
yeah.
to
Absolutely.
our city code.
Well, doesn't the city follow that county code?
They can't be because
We have
then
our
we
own
wouldn't have
code.
development in the flood
We,
zone.
right, we do have our own code, but I know, like, the city follows a lot or adopts a lot of.
Probably
the
over
county code.
time.
I just don't know.
I think
I
that
There's
should-
also state code. And this development has gone to State Plus, which is all the agencies come and review it. So, I mean, city code, we have our own book of city code, but I'm sure a lot of it is based on county code.
I think there's a
They have to
certain,
meet a lot of the. same
Right.
I
codes.
think
Right.
codes have to be a
Mandatory.
certain level in order to get to, for that stage, what John was talking about, the stage 6 or the stage 5 of, for the insurance. I think a lot of that is required by FEMA in order for you to get that kind of insurance discounts. And that'd be my guess, that it's up to code on what FEMA demands. And I think probably the county and the state doesn't have those codes, but the county has the same.
I'll
kind of-
just throw out, he said the county's at 6, the city's at 8, which implies that our codes are stricter than the
Yes,
county codes.
right, yeah.
So
That's surprising, isn't it?
I was thinking it was going the other way, because he said the goal was.
Oh,
to
no,
get to
5. He wanted to go to
So I-
5, so ours is not as good.
I'm thinking,
Oh, so the lower numbers are better.
He's
what
at
I'm
6, we want to
thinking.
be, he wants to be at 5. We're at 8.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if we prohibited altogether development in the floodplain, if that would bring us up. If that would-
I'm sure there's a lot of criteria, and that's a comment that Jeff made, that it's a lot of work. And he kind of does this along with all his other things, whereas they have a whole group that can work on,
Yeah.
what
And they have
criteria,
$60
what can
million
we change? Right.
to devote toward maintenance. Jeez.
Well,
it's a
since
lot harder.
2004, did he say?
2000, okay, that's a lot.
So
that's a
that's-
lot, yeah. It is, yeah,
16.
still 60 million. And that's with shifting most of the requirements to the private owners. You can imagine how much that is in altogether. But anyway,
How much for stormwater facilities?
Yeah, that was
16 million. How much for maintaining stormwater facilities?
so does anybody have anything else to say?
Just real quick, Karen, I got it on Cherry Street. I guess just in regards to that, I really do appreciate y'all looking at it. With the first one, I do feel like if we were like to get more information and feel there was a concrete reason why we thought that development would create more sea level rise, that, now would be the time to interject that, because this is the time when unless I'm missing something, this is the time that we're discussing whether or not this would happen. So I think it's an appropriate thing if we did find that out, or even if we intuitively felt that way, if y'all felt that way, because, as much as we want to maybe not believe it, there's no way that removing those trees and disturbing a lot, destroying that land, there's no way that's not going to have a negative impact on our environment. It's a no-brainer. And we've run out of so much space, we really have very little left. So not to mention that unless there is a body that really knows where the wetlands are and is really paying attention, I don't trust those people for a minute. I mean, Delaware is one of the fastest being developed states in the country, and nobody's going to pay attention to that unless someone makes them. So someone has to make them really find out where the wetlands are, and someone has to make sure they really don't encroach on that. And I don't trust them at all. I think there's a reason why in Delaware we're in corporate, entrenchment or whatever you want to call it. Like it's because that is what takes precedence, not the environment, not the well-being of people or the water. It's the developers and the money. And even him saying they don't have money to do certain things, that's appalling. There's so much money in this state. why does our land use department not have enough money to do the things they need to do to protect our land? Or I'm not sure who they're working for. Are they working for the developers or are they working for the people? I hope they're working for the people.
Well, there's regulations, and as long as they're following the regulations, I mean, this task force can't do anything to stop them at this point, and neither can the planning commission or the council. If the regulations are there and they're abiding by them, you can't stop in midstream, and you'd be in court the next day by the developer, and you'd lose.
Well, even the changing of the zoning, that can't be,
I don't think you can do it now.
you can't be checked that,
No.
we just have.
What would the impetus for that be? It has to come from the property owner to initiate that.
Has the comprehensive plan and the zoning been changed already to
No,
accommodate?
no,
no.
it has to be, and it's only
Has-
been a
has-
couple of years old.
Oh,
And the last thing I'll
But-
say, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say it's zoned, I mean, it's currently zoned as industrial office park.
Yeah.
So they by right can build a big warehouse there. or-
No, I know, I
mean,
know.
it's not, you can't make it open space. I mean, somebody owns that property and,
as long as they're following the
right,
zoning and the
and
regulations,
they have
no one can
to,
stop it.
I mean, they have to follow all these regulations. Not
You mean
only
when
by
they're
our
building?
city,
Well, I just think about what
And
happened
Van
down at
Rafton.
Grassdale, and that's, that isn't what happened down there. And I mean, I spoke to Sean Garvin about this myself, and he's like, nobody's been down there in a month, and they were building on wetlands. I mean, they were destroying, they didn't build anything there, but they were. There's certain plant life that lives there, you can see it, it's destroyed. Nobody was paying attention. But just since we had a question, if I could just say my last point is that the program that we're working with the NRCS, that is like an estuary health program, I believe. And I would just want to make sure that we don't damage our relationship with them by doing anything such as, development on the river. And I do wonder how those filter things that go out into the water, are they not on electricity? What happens if we do have a major storm? Do those filtration things not working? And then all that is just going into the river? I just have to think about,
Okay, I just have one thing to say, Karen, that as much as you don't want to believe it, as much as I want to believe, I want to believe it, and I haven't been able to find it. So anyway, that's just a comment to say. Okay, so let's get back to our agenda. I think the next thing was, anybody has, any of the task force members have anything else that they're interested in talking about? Do you have any items they wanted to bring up? No, okay, and how about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
just one thing, I know the city's transportation plan went before city council, but I don't think you voted on it, correct? Wasn't,
There's nothing to vote on. I mean,
Oh,
they
it
simply
was-
submitted the plan,
so it's accepted.
it's accepted. And now, they just laid out the timelines for when they plan to do various things.
All right, so the one component that is in the transportation improvement program, so it's been authorized to be funded, is the Route 9 bridge
Right.
by Dobbinsville. However, the date is 2030. I think.
2030. And so we are trying to get that moved up, see if we can get that moved up with the new infrastructure plan or program that was Federal Infrastructure Act that was passed, includes a lot of grants. And so there's some hope of requesting a grant to get the money to do that work sooner than 2030. However, the state has to apply for that grant. The city cannot do it because it is a state road. So the city can urge the state, we can talk to Senator Poor, we can talk to DelDOT, but the city can't pass a resolution and say, we're gonna do this, because it's not the city's jurisdiction.
And even if we move it up, you know how, if the railroad thing is supposed to have been done 2 years ago.
And it keeps
And
getting done.
we're still waiting for that, so I don't know. It's not a.
And the good thing about the city doing a transportation plan is, like, they've rated all the projects. And Del Dot was part of the team.
Mhm.
And so you typically do get funding for your high priority.
Well,
projects.
Heather Dunnigan, the woman from WMAPCO, said, if it's not in the plan, it will not be funded. So that's the advantage, that's why we had the plan done. And some of the issues in the plan deal with floodings, just most especially the Route 9 south of Gosnell. But there's some other
others,
smaller
right.
areas that are at issue.
Well, some
too.
of the intersections as
Right.
well.
Right, but
Okay. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to put on the agenda for, Rick, you said you spoke to someone at Delaware City, that maybe. you wanted
I'll
to-
leave. That, the individual, all she did was handle permits.
Oh,
So
so
it was,
not too much, okay. I did, when I talked to Mr. Varga, I want to say Varga, even though it's W, I don't know why, but anyway, who's the floodplain manager for the state. He said he would come to the meeting next time if we wanted him to talk, and I think he would be a good person to talk to. And anybody else have any other items, there are issues that hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have something to talk about with the NRSB, no, NRCS. Okay, anyway, we'll be on our way there. Gosh, I hope so. Anyway, okay, so if you think of anything in now and the next couple of weeks, if you let me know, if you have someone you'd like to invite, or if you have any items that you'd like to discuss, here, then just let me know by email, okay? And so I guess we're done. Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned. Kathy, thank you for sticking it out, even though you're obviously a little kind of
Sorry.
Boffenschein there, but we wouldn't have known because you
I
left.
don't feel bad.
Oh,
When I
gosh.
get on one of those coffee rolls, I can't stop myself.
no, I know how that goes.
You're gonna get like 3 packs of lozenges. The coffee helps. Right? No, that's, I mean, that's kids.
Oh, that's a Stacy.
Could I just stay?
Yeah.
I was looking at them. I am back computer in this. I can't get it. Give it to the candy. You can do all that.
I know, me too.